Welcome to the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We are going to talk today about name, image, and likeness and how it fits into the shifting landscape in college sports with conference realignment. Now, we handled realignment yesterday on the BWI Daily Edition with the senior editor of Blue White Illustrated, Nate Bauer. He joined the show. We had a really good conversation about that. So make sure you subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to, go back and listen to that, because this is something that I saved from yesterday that fits into that conversation, because this deserves its own spotlight on the situation, because it's a messy, sticky situation, and I don't think that anybody should have a 100% locked-in opinion about name, image, and likeness. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad that can go with that. But it's something that Nate said at the end of the show when it came to conferences and the way they've behaved over the years when it comes to realignment and their priorities when it comes to competition and to the lore of college football. So let's start with that. Let's start with, and this is where it's going to get really touchy for a lot of people. So I'm trying to come at this with an even hand, but please, let's give each other some leeway here. College football, it's always been said that college football is the purest form of football. And by college football, I mean college sports. Football is the main driver of all the economy behind all of this, all the massive TV deals and money, which is causing the problems in the system. So when we talk about college sports and I say football, it means all of it necessarily. But the purity of college sports, college football, is what you've been told over your lifetime is the most beautiful, pure expression of love of the sport. That those athletes, the majority of them, are not going on to a professional career. So they are at this level to get an education and to pursue excellence for no other reason, not tainted by money. But what we talked about yesterday is that money has been tainting college football for 50 years now. These conferences and these universities that have been making decisions in their best interest, which in the end is about competition and being able to win. So there is partially that. But with that comes vast sums of money. So upwards of $35, $45, $50 million on the line, depending on what conference you're in. So conferences, and this has been my biggest problem for a very long time, and schools, the object is not competition. It's not a fair competition. So when we have the conversation about UCF and their opportunity, or Western Michigan a couple years ago, their opportunity to be in the conversation for a college football playoff. Well, they can't play a hard enough schedule because they are not in a strong enough conference. Well, how do they get in a strong enough conference? Well, they have to be invited. Then they have to win all of it there. And then by that point, it's not about who's the best. And whenever you have these conversations of nobody wants to watch UCF, nobody wants to watch Boise State. Why? What if, just on a random offshoot, Boise State is one of the best 4 teams in the country using our previous college football playoff model? What if they are? But they can't play in the college football playoff because we don't think they're good enough. They don't have the right metrics. We don't even have to look that far for a really strong argument about that with BYU last year. Not only was BYU an undefeated juggernaut in 2020 during their COVID season, they had the number 2 overall pick at quarterback on their team. Quarterbacks drive success in college football. But BYU was never taken seriously in 2020, and honestly, probably rightly so. But the conversation is never genuine about why. Nobody wants to watch BYU during the college football playoffs. The ratings would be low. We wouldn't make enough money on it. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Why is it not about the competition? Why is Texas, and we'll move on to that. We'll just put that as a question that has not been answered. Let's move on to the tradition and the lore of college football that we all have been experiencing over our lifetimes, the pageantry of it, not just the marching band, but your regional rivals. Why don't schools play regional rivals anymore? Why doesn't Penn State play Pitt? There's a gigantic section of the fan base that wants to know, why aren't we upholding traditions? Well, the simple answer is, if you play Pitt every year, you're not going to have a competitive schedule to make it to the college football playoff. The list goes on and on. We have these conversations. But also because the ratings after a while would go down, because it's of regional interest and not of national interest. You won't draw eyeballs from Iowa. And I use Iowa as a random Midwestern state that is a part of the Big Ten. You won't get eyeballs in Utah or whatever for a national game between Pitt and Penn State. Now, if you have Pitt versus one of their ACC rivals, or if you have Penn State against a non-conference team like, I don't know, Auburn, more eyeballs, more interest, more revenue. So none of these things that are driving the conferences and the schools in a direct way have anything to do about competition. Now, in the end, having the most resources, being on top of the pile, makes you competitive. It makes you a winner. But that is a far cry from the purity of college sports and college football. That is not like we want to find the best people and uphold our traditions, and at the end of the day, competition is the most important thing. It's the difference between, the sportsmanship we all talk about and the winning at all cost, which is what we're doing now. So the conferences and the universities have not been operating on that purity of mind scale that they've been talking about. They've been going after the money. Now, and again, we can have this argument back and forth about the money leads to winning, and winning's the most important. Yes, that's true. But $55 million? So this is my biggest problem, is the only people that are acting with purity of the sport in mind, or that are supposed to at this point, are the players. They're the only people in this equation. If we are honest with ourselves as the viewers, and we know what's going on, the only people we're upholding to that standard right now, or we have until very recently, have been those players. And I'm not here to tell you that a college education is not important, and that getting a free one and taking advantage of all those things is not an important thing to do. I understand, as somebody who got a college education, to do this and to sit here talking to you about it. I understand that. But look not at the ecosystem that you were in when you were in college or that you went through, but look at what the environment is that these young people are in. So in a $1 million enterprise that is growing by the day, we're saying that there is no money for players to make off of what is essentially their product. They are the product on the field that we all know and love. Now, the system of replacing them every 4 to 5 years, or 6 because of COVID, is what reduces the leverage of those people in that situation. But here's the thing. Should they be the ones left out of this equation? And I know that we can calculate how much everything is worth that they're given. And I understand that athletes are catered to more than regular people, but they also have special skills that regular people do not, that if you're watching this show, you care about. See, that's the thing, is you are the driving force behind all of this because you love football. And to me, that is the saving grace in all of this, is that football's awesome. Football is so much fun. It is such a great game. It is exciting. It's dramatic. It pulls you in. Those big moments, those big plays, nothing builds more anticipation than a 75-yard pass down the field into one-on-one coverage with a defensive back and a receiver. There's nothing that builds that anticipation like that bomb going off in the air. What happens? Who's going to come down with it? The excitement of the fourth quarter, all of those things, those aren't going away because, surprise, they haven't. In this environment where money has been driving things the whole time, because we love football so much, and we want to be a part of it, whether it's watching, going to the games, buying things that are associated with football, or going to the universities of our favorite football teams. These players are a part of that process. So having the ability to make money off their name, image, and likeness, to me, is a fair compensation as a part of this gigantic thing that we all want to be a part of. And I understand that they do get advantages and they do get things in life that are special compared to the rest of us. But that's where we've got to separate ourselves in this conversation. That isn't us. And if you were doing something great on TV that everybody was watching and you weren't compensated for it, you would feel a certain way about that as well. Now, here's where it is difficult, is that these are kids. These are 18-year-old kids. And money it solves so many problems, but it creates so many more, right? Giving an 18-year-old male, and again, we're going to talk specifically about football here, $1 million without any coaching, without any sort of guidelines, guide rails, or education, in certain ways, it's like giving him a gun. Because, with a lot of money, he could buy a gun. So it's a dangerous proposition, and it creates a lot of problems. It absolutely does. But just because there are problems, should we throw our hands up in the air and go, well, doesn't matter. Guess we can't do it then. See, I don't think so. I think that we can be problem solvers in this situation. And the people that I feel worst for, truthfully, in this equation are the coaches. And I know what you might be thinking, because they are a part of the system that has been compensated. The top coaches in college football, James Franklin being among them, are compensated at a level that you and I, unless you're very lucky, which good for you, we can't really dream of. And yet, at the same time, I do believe that they have the best interest for these kids in mind. And a lot of times, you need that control. You need to guide these young men and to be a part of the growth and teaching process. And this adds a whole nother layer onto their job. This adds a whole nother layer of complexity that most of them that have grown up in sports their whole lives are not adapted to, they're against, because they believe the same things that you do when it comes to the purity of the sport and what it's really all about. And for them, they live it. They live finding these kids, giving them these opportunities, teaching them, educating them, becoming a pseudo-parent to them. That's all real. That's all. Like, if you don't believe that James Franklin cares about the guys that he recruits to the program, like, you're not looking at the evidence. You're not looking at the number of players, the overwhelming number of players that do respect the coaching staff. And I'm using James Franklin as a catch-all for Phil Troutwine, Brent Pry, Anthony Poindexter, all these guys that have invested their lives into football and the pursuit of winning and excellence. And here's another thing that you're adding to their plate that takes away from the focus on the game. It's their job to remove all of these other things that I'm throwing in the air and then win with football. So that is another tough thing. But again, I have not begrudged a coach their compensation at any point in their careers. I don't think that is a fair thing to do. But we've got to be realistic about the fact that they are compensated so well. So I do believe you can add to their job descriptions. And football coaching does take so much from you. If you look at the burnout rate and the number of people that have had to give and sacrifice so much on that level, I'm trying to see this from both sides. Because just because there are problems doesn't mean there aren't solutions. So when it comes to name, image, and likeness, and this is where we get to the Penn State part of this equation, is that Penn State, as a university and as a football program, has talked about wanting education to be a part of the process. That's right. That, again, educating players on how to be financially literate, how to make money, how to use their name, image, and likeness, and leverage it the best way possible. That is the proper way to go about that. The problem is there are places that don't care about the proper way to go about that, which is why we're here talking about this right now, because the win at all costs model is where we are. That's been the driving force over the decades, generation of college football. And I guess in the end, I just don't think it's fair, and I'm glad we're moving in this direction, and I hope that we find good solutions for these football players to be a part of the system and to reap the benefits of it in a tangible way. And I'm not talking about just the superstars. I'm not talking about just the guys that we need to worry about, the guys with low-income families. I'm talking about everyone a part of the system is raised and enriched by it. That should be the goal of any business. And sports is a business, is that everyone should be enriched by it. And along the way, we've seen that we love sports, right? I don't believe that you then have to sacrifice other programs to find that balance and common ground. So Penn State can still have a track and field team. They can still have, it's varying degrees of this, right? It's always going to be varying degrees of what you get. Because right now, student athletes don't always get a full scholarship in those other programs. The cost of tuition keeps going up. The cost of transportation, busing, travel, lodging, all of those things keep going up. So infuse more money. Find more revenue sources. That's where I think you need to be when it comes to name, image, and likeness, and allow these players to do that. So in the end, maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe there is no common ground, and one thing is going to have to go, or there's going to be a major shift in the way we feel about football. But this is the thing, and this is because I was a fan of the NFL first. I as you can see behind me, I loved football. I never do that right. I'm looking at the mirror. I loved football on the NFL level first, and then I came to be at college, and I came to love college football and everything that it is. So to me, money doesn't taint things for me. And maybe that's my view of it. But this is the last thing that I'll say. If we are going to say that money is going to be a part of college football, and that we are still in our hearts, because it's happening physically, we can't stop it at this point, but if there is a resentment towards money in college sports, I would say that we have two options, because this middle ground has led us to this second option. Either we take money out of it completely and nobody gets paid, or we pay everybody. And I think that we've seen, because football, again, the saving grace of this is because football is so fun and so awesome, and it is something that we should embrace and enjoy in so many different ways as far as its uniting forces and all of those great things that we love about football. I think that can persevere through our shifting perception of it, because that's what's changing. Our perception of what's happening is changing, but it's been happening the whole time. All right, can we hug it out? We agree that we're still friends? I hope so. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that it made you think about, some of the deeper parts of all of this. And if you would like to see more of this, and you'd like all of this stuff to continue, please subscribe to the BWI Daily Edition, where you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. And of course, make sure you check out bwi.rivals.com. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, the host of the BWI Daily Edition. We'll talk again tomorrow.